Hello and welcome back to the Thursday Night Podcast. My name is Brady, joined by David for this episode 292, recorded in full transparency quite a bit later than we expected. We gave you a tease that maybe seemed like, well, we'll be back here soon because we're expecting some news to drop. And here we are, 8 days after Georgia State's season has ended, and we are no clearer on the status of Jonas Hayes as the Georgia State men's basketball coach. It's kind of the main topic, kind of the only topic lingering, almost to the point where we wondered if it was even worth getting back and recording at this point, because I think everyone is just kind of waiting for that shoe to drop for just their view of Georgia State athletics going forward. But we decided it was certainly worth still coming on, recording, keep a schedule going, talk about baseball, get it to it right at the end. But golf had a great event, kind of tipping back in the right direction, Georgia State golf. But there was really nowhere else to start, and I want to hit a few things off the top here. This is not me having saved all of the information I've accumulated and making you listen to the Thursday Night Podcast just so you can get all the inside stuff. So if you were expecting this to be like a juicy, like all the gossip, all the info that no one's told you anywhere yet, that's not what this is. So like and subscribe. Thank you for following. But I'm not going to ever... I don't want to be
as much as we do when it comes to this, to be fair.
And I want to make kind of a point about that, but I don't want to be someone who is parading the information they know or the conversations they've had as ooh, I'm teasing you with this. That's not how I want to operate. I don't really like when other people do that. It's not even a sub-tweet or it's a side-eye mention of anyone, because there are honestly too many people in journalism and sports journalism who do stuff like that, and I don't really like that. But the other part of it is, Charlie Cobb doesn't like leaks. Charlie Cobb does not care to have this stuff play out over the media. Charlie Cobb doesn't really like putting out statements. I mean, last year, obviously, we got the word, more or less, that Jonas Hayes was staying for year 4, but it didn't even come from any kind of statement from the athletic director, or from the athletic department, or from whoever. It was kind of, we got a quote from Mike Holmes at All Blue, All NAL, and kind of the direction they were going was that they were going to lean into that to try and boost the roster that way and make year 4 be the first winning season. And obviously we know how that went. But not someone who wants this stuff to be out in the open, doesn't want to, in the fairness part, it's not like he uses it himself when he wants to and shuns it when he doesn't want it out there. He just doesn't see any use in it. And I think it is a completely flawed way to handle public relations and fan-based relations in the year 2026 when everyone wants to be let in the process. And I think, if nothing else, this saga going as it has shown that the number one need for the next athletic director, whenever that day comes, is going to be someone who understands how this works and doesn't need to be set in this way of not wanting to play the PR game and not want to keep the fan base at least somewhat engaged and happy that things might be changing. Because I still think, I guess my top ticker line for this, I still think the change is coming. I couldn't tell you why it is. There's plenty of theories. Believe me, I have played out all of them in my head. I have done research on a lot of these things. I don't know what the deal is. No one really knows what the deal is outside of Charlie Cobb's office. But I still think that the change is going to come, frankly, because I think it's more damning at this point that it's been 8 days and he hasn't gotten the vote of confidence than it is that it's been 8 days and he has not been fired. But when this is all said and done, you don't have anything to sell. It's going to feel like it was an agonizing process after a coach who went 30 games under 500 for 4 seasons, and a fan base that's already been charitably not all that thrilled with the direction of things. You haven't given him any reason to turn that around. And I also think Charlie doesn't really care about that. He isn't really interested in winning over hearts and minds in that way. He doesn't really care if people hold that against him, because like I say, that's just not anything that is in his field of vision when he is assessing these things. So I think that's about all the stuff I would need to hit right off the top. We might be springing this because at one point in time early in our history, we did a very good job of recording podcasts the day before news was going to break. So if that is the case, then I guess the final thing to say is, from the future, you're welcome if that's what we ended up doing. But I'll throw it to David for his thoughts in this utter limbo that we sit in on March 11th, 8 days after Georgia State's season ended, and yet in some ways feels like it's still going.
Yeah, there's no way to have a conversation like this without kind of taking a shot at the athletic director. And I don't even want to do that because I think whatever opinion one has of the past few years, the athletic director at Georgia State, certainly is a lightning rod for takes. And even when Georgia State was good in football and basketball, there's still a lightning rod of takes. Speaking strictly as far as like just practicality, Georgia State played their last game last Tuesday, I believe. Yeah, last Tuesday. And so, okay, I could understand waiting for the Sun Belt tournament to end. Okay, Troy went back to back, and that game was at like I think 4 p.m. on Monday.
No, it was an evening game.
Was it evening? Okay, maybe I just saw the updates on Facebook or something.
There were many as the days went on. Like maybe this is the day, and this is the reason why. And we've gotten here, and we are out of the reasons why, as far as why would be delayed in any kind of reasonable sense when you assess it. So.
Yeah, and I mean, you said the word engaged, either engaged or engagement, and I think that's a great word to describe where Georgia State athletics are right now. Because, and I kind of ask this, I kind of leave it up rhetorical, where is the reason for Panther fans to be engaged right now? You have the women's team and the men's team getting unceremoniously, removed from their conference tournaments in the first round. You have a football team that had one win,
zero FBS wins.
Zero FBS wins, 2 wins in the season prior, You have a baseball team that we'll talk about that's, probably middle of the pack Sun Belt team, but it's such a good baseball conference that it's like you being middle of the pack, you might as well be bad. Which is
and
unfair.
The story,
to be clear, that is unfair.
Also, again, fair or unfair for the baseball team and the players on it. The story with baseball is that this is a year they should have been in their new stadium already and haven't been. And it's still unclear who the blame really lies with there. But like the thing people are talking about, if they are talking about Georgia State baseball, is the stadium, which was promised a decade ago, was supposed to be for 2026, and now is going to be for 2027 in all likelihood. So. Even there, it's like its own little story of like what people are paying attention to is like, man, weren't they supposed to be down by an old Fulton County Stadium by this point? And that's not the case.
I was a freshman in college when those first mocks came up. And, like as sports fans, we know that from mock release to shovel in the ground to I'm buying a ticket to go to the first game can be such a long time, But you're absolutely correct. Like that, I've been talking about the results specifically, but like that's another thing that has been in limbo in Georgia State. Like I feel like Georgia State for the last like 3-ish years has just been in this state of limbo, and it's a little bit unfair because I don't want to. This isn't a slander the AD type conversation. That's not the point. But like you said, like I ask, like there's either two things that are happening, right? That, in my view, at this point, it's either we're going to be really unhappy and we're going into year 5 next year. That's certainly a possibility. But if that is the path that we go down, the fact that it's been another poor season, another season with not even underperforming Georgia State results, but just underperforming results, period. The fact that it's been this long since the tournament ended, since Georgia State's appearance in the tournament ended, that we don't have a vote of confidence is crazy. And so the other option, the other pathway that we could go down is, okay, yes, a separation is happening, but I can't think of a reason why it's not. Like, you can't interview a lot of the coaches you might be. I mean, most people would have their conference tournaments right now. I mean, it's Wednesday, so we're into like the second, third round, and some other conferences are done. But like, you don't have to have a coach to at least be looking through candidates for your next one. You might not be able to start the interviews until next week, but like, that doesn't mean you can't do the separation. So now we're just 8 days later with no information on anything. And this is somehow worse than both of the pathways that I laid out just now. And so like hopefully tomorrow there's something like we've, put it out in the world and tomorrow something is going to happen, because it's just odd. The silence is odd.
Yeah, this is not normal behavior. And obviously it's not fun to put out like the generic statement of like things are not acceptable. We're evaluating the program, whatever. But like if that had happened on March 4th and we still were where we are, I think people would feel at least a little. I mean, they'd still be skittish because this has been a week. But that would at least give you a little bit of leeway of like, we're working on this. We recognize this hasn't gone well. I think people are still kind of waiting for that for football as well. That, Del McGee hired and has won 4 games in 2 seasons. And obviously he's sticking around. And there's reasons for that. And obviously we've gone through a lot of it. Wait to see what happens there for football, which thankfully is a million years away at this point. Thankfully we're still in March. We're not like battling all of that. I guess spring ball coming up.
You're right. And I don't even mean that. It's gonna come up on us quick though, because this
it
always happens. And I am really looking forward to this upcoming football season for a variety of reasons that we don't need to get into. But like I keep thinking like, okay, it's the middle of March now. As soon as we hit like April 1st, I'm gonna snap my fingers and it's gonna be like, oh wow, opening week is like next week or something. So, but to your point,
yeah. A couple of things I kind of want to go through on the front of what you just laid out of. So the first thing I'd say is I don't believe you need to have fired a coach to start the groundwork to hire the next one. Like you can't make a hire. Like it's pretty hard to be like, hey, that guy's got that title head coach. Yeah, he's out of the picture. Obviously, you need to make that move to make the next hire. But this stuff has a way of working out. All working out in agent circles and all the rest of it. Like there's a way to start the conversation before moving and making the decision to fire a coach. I don't really know why you wouldn't just go ahead and do it if that's the plan, but like I say, full transparency pod, like we don't know why it is the case that nothing has happened, but I still believe it will, partially because, I can read a record and I can see what this team has looked like and it's not working, but more to that, like last year we got the pitch of this is why they are not making a move. They're going to give him more money than he's had around the program through NIL to keep players and bring in players that are going to enhance those guys. And they're going to exceed the 14-win mark they've hit the last 2 seasons, kind of plateaued. It didn't work. And I feel pretty safe saying after Jelani Hamilton is second team All-Sun Belt, nearly 18 points a game, I don't think you can retain him a second straight year. And probably you got issues, even if the staff comes back, of retaining Micah Tucker, Malachi Brown, because that's just this day and age in college basketball, where there's going to be people interested when they saw what Micah did as a true freshman. Malachi is now going into his 3rd year as a college point guard. And there's still things you probably want to see from him to grow from and more consistency, but right now, what he has been able to do in 2 seasons at Georgia State is still makes him, I think, an enticing maybe second option, third option in the portal. Maybe he isn't nearly as definitely going to get posted like what Jelani showed, but I think there's a real risk you lose all 3 of those guys. In which case, what you're really saying is he's coming back and he's losing all of the best players from this team that only won 10 games as it is, but we're going to give him another chance to totally remake the roster again. Like, if you're listening to this, you understand that does not make logical sense. And I don't think that makes logical sense to Charlie Cobb either. Like, I don't think anyone looking at this thinks that after last year's gambit failed and the team got 4 wins worse than they were in that kind of last chance moment, that there's going to be a year 5. Not to mention, he's got a 5-year contract. He would be coaching in his last year. After going 48 and 78, you're not going to give a guy an extension, but you almost have to in that situation. Or he's the lamest lame duck coach that's in existence, and he's not going to have any ability to get guys to come through the portal. Like, people are going to assess this, and it's going to be far down the board of their list of who they want to bring, because I don't know that they're going to directly get that used against them in recruiting, but like the players and their people around them are only going to have to look at the situation and be like, we're not sure this guy's going to be here past this year. It hasn't gotten great the last 4 seasons, so we're going to go to this other option that's basically the same, but the coach has more stability and has offered more success. So you're setting him up to fail if you do bring him back in these circumstances, even if obviously if you're Jonas Hayes, you don't want to lose your job, you don't want to lose your chance to be a head coach. But like, just looking at it from every piece. And then I'll throw this on top, just kind of end this long session of kind of running through. Clearly this has not been on my mind all week. It's not like I've been just running through every permutation with this. It's that it feels like a long time. It is a long time. It is a disastrous amount of time for there to be no public comment on all of this. But Selection Sunday is this Sunday. The NCAA tournament still has weeks to progress through, and then the Final Four happens beginning of April. If you don't follow college basketball that closely, you might not know, but the Final Four is kind of when all the coaches get together. They have a whole convention when they're there, meet up with people, make assessments of future staff members, or if you're a new coach, putting a staff together. That is the actual like non-arbitrary deadline that there needs to be a new head coach in place. That's when they need to be able to go there with their new title, kind of getting the lay of the land, knowing who they want to bring in, and they can make those offers when they're meeting guys there in where's the Final Four this year? Doesn't matter. For the sake of it, whatever city it's in. That sounds plausible.
I know that one of the regional finals is in Chicago, and I did look. I did try to go.
Oh, it's in Lucas Oil. It's in Indy.
Okay.
So it's in Indy. We're not to that point yet, and so let that not be absolving the process to this point. But there's coaches that have not been fired yet, who will have people who have already replaced them by the time like the first weekend ends. So like, it feels like an inanely long amount of time, and I think the process has been very poor. I don't think letting it get to this point without any kind of comment on the matter, any suggestion that there's a process in place looking at this, has been to any positive for Georgia State athletics. But that doesn't mean that it's not 2 days away, 3 days a day, whatever it is. And again, couldn't tell you what's going on. I would love to get to the bottom of kind of why it is drug out. I have, with a fine-tooth comb, tried to find every possible reason why and be like, yeah, this is what's going on. It's not there yet, and it might not ever be there because that's not what the athletic director wants there to be. But I think that the way that the Sun Belt tournament's set up, where it is so early in the conference tournament schedule, it has just made it seem like, especially because it used to be on Selection Sunday that the tournament ends, so it was a different time. And if we were on that timeline and we're past the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, there's no news. Like, that is, I'd be with you all the way. But I still think that there is time, even if the time to this point has not, at least evidently to us watching on from the outside, been well used and well managed.
I wish I could even say that it's frustrating. I wanted to, but it's like the silence means that I can't even be frustrated. Like, I don't even know what I'm frustrated about. Like, just, oh no, Georgia State had another bad season. Congrats. That's been every men's basketball season for the last 4 years. That's been the last 2 football seasons. Like, it's the lack of frustration would be the news story here, so hopefully it does get resolved soon, because there are a lot of good candidates out there that are probably going to get their name called by other schools. Georgia State's season isn't the only season that's over, and the high major schools, they're also going to be looking for coaches, and the poaching from mid-major to high major has been at an all-time high lately, so hopefully Georgia State can find somebody that they like, and soon, if they decide to do that.
Let me just clarify, for the purposes of Thursday Night Podcast LLC, you can be frustrated out there if you listen to this. Absolutely, feel free to. There's no reason that you wouldn't be watching what you watched the last 4 seasons, if you have even still been tuning in on a weekly basis, which I will give you bonus points and brownie points if you have been, because having done it myself, there's basically been nothing to take away from it, but just kind of banging your head on the table. That's the kind of quality of the basketball that's been played after what had been a really successful mid-major program. So David's being kind. I'm being anarchic. I like be mad. It's fine. Like you should be. You're allowed to be. And the reason this isn't allowed to stay this way is because we haven't had any indication that everyone involved is frustrated. It might be Charlie Cobb is like punching a hole in his wall, mad at how the basketball has been. But if you don't let any kind of indication that's the case, whether it's through making a decision to fire a coach like the day after the season or in a statement where you strongly voice how upset you are, and people are out there waiting for that, then of course when that doesn't come, it's just going to breed further frustration and apathy. And so this is a bed that they have made for themselves, and it's kind of, what are you going to do now? And the reality is you might already have people that are just soured enough on this and made their assumptions already that nothing's changing. And even if it is, you're going to have a hard time buying those people back. And it'll have to be a whole other pod if nothing is changing and if Jonas Hayes is back for year 5. Just because, I mean, whether it's that or whether it is leaving, there's a whole other episode to get to with like how we got to this point and like other than it was bad, like what was going on that led to the lack of success the last 4 seasons. But I really hope that takes a certain direction, just because I have nothing to sell you on if the decision is taken that they want to have this go on a year further. Just because there is nothing we have seen suggests that is a good use of anyone's time. Jonas Hayes included, by the way, just because I'm sure it's been a really frustrating existence for him as well.
He said some of the same things in a little bit more coach speak way, but he said some of the same things that we've said, and it's that level of honesty that I respect. I respect the hell out of it. But I, like you say, I can sit here and I can talk myself into convincing somebody that, year 3 of Coach McGee is going to be good for Georgia State. What does good mean? That we'll see. But I can sit there and talk myself into that. I don't know that I could do the same thing for Coach Hayes.
I cannot. I would not.
Like we've
frankly,
seen
I don't
both
know what
sides
that
of
would.
the coin.
I don't know what coverage would turn into with that. Frankly, I am sitting here saying I don't know how I would cover on a podcast or in-person media year 5 because I really can't spin you on anything with this because it'd be a whole other roster makeover, and that hasn't yielded them any more than barely under 500 seasons. And why, with all of the where everything sits now, heading into a lame duck year, not on a contract, would it be any different now? So we're an honesty pod, transparency and an honesty pod.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at. So this wasn't going to be the story of the Jonas Hayes situation, nor was it going to be like putting flowers on it and making it seem better than it is. Time's just going to have to tell on it being better than it is right now, because this is a real low point for Georgia State men's basketball, which made the NCAA tournament almost as many times as it didn't in the last decade before this tenure began.
Exactly. So, we'll see.
Yeah, rounding out the basketball stuff, not to dwell too much on it, but James Madison beats Troy in the women's title game. Even though they're the 4 seed, I think that's a good representation for the Sun Belt. JMU's missed as more favorites. Maybe the 1 seed both times, maybe the 2 seed on the other times, but they've been a really good program. They got one of the best players in the league in Peyton McDaniel, so I think either them or Troy would have been a good Sun Belt representative, but I think JMU, just with having possibly, one of the best players best player, like second, third best player on the court, even against a good high major, gives them a shot. So props to the Dukes there. And then second straight year, Troy men's basketball going to the dance, Scott Cross leading them back, possibly ending up in a program not too far from Georgia State, as there's some buzz that Georgia Tech might be sniffing around him for their opening as they fired Damon Stoudemire. I can already hear kind of like the Georgia Tech fans gristling at hiring a mid-major coach, but dude's a ball coach. What he has now done 2 straight years is made the NCAA tournament, but not only that, they replaced 4 starters off of last year's team. And they did it not through the portal, but through guys that were already on the roster. So, absolute props to him. They beat Georgia Southern, who had tried to make the 6 wins in 6 days thing happen and were not able to. I don't really want to just make this into more of a GSU boo fest, but it's you watch that happen, and it makes some sense because Georgia Southern, the way they play up-tempo, shooting a lot of threes, if they're making them, and if you're coming in cold and haven't played anyone yet, That could be a style that's pretty hard to go up against. And you add in South Alabama, one of the teams they beat, plays a lot of zone. If a team's making threes against you with a zone, like, you're in trouble. And they made, I think, like 23, some absurd number. I think it was a tournament record. Georgia State's not been...
They put like three. Georgia Southern put like 3 players on the all-tournament team. Like, that's gotta feel terrible.
Yeah, I mean, but to bring it back home, and obviously, I think that would have been the like biggest ignominy for Georgia State fans if that story had ended with Georgia Southern cutting down the nets as a 10 seed. But like, not to boo-hoo and make it a Georgia State thing, but like, the closest they came was last year when they won a single tournament game. Like, they win one and done 3 of the 4 years under Jonas Hayes at the Sun Belt tournament, whereas now we've seen someone make nearly a miracle run from a double-digit seed, and you just think of how far Georgia State's been from that conceivably being an option. So, not to end on a downer, but almost like I feel like everyone listening to this might want a downer just because it's accurate. You know, downer is kind of the vibes around Georgia State basketball right now. Really hoping the next time I'm not overpromising when I say we have some more on this whole situation a week from now or whenever, but we've got baseball going on. I almost want to like say definitively now that I don't want to record again until there's some finality or some sense of finality on this basketball situation, because this is the thing that is lingering. Like, there's not anything you're going to talk about again. And, you know, spring ball starting later this month, so I'm probably not going to be able to keep that promise either, but just I'm making a fake stand here just to be like, this is not working out. You got to get something moving forward, even if it is the news nobody wants to hear and we're getting year 5. That at least would be some sense of progress, and we can move forward and just kind of, you know, talk about that in whatever sense we end up talking about that. But
well, yeah, I mean, like, to put a pin on it though, like, the offseason has to take a direction. Like, you, as much as it has started, you really can't start it until you know definitively who is coaching this team next year.
Jonas Hayes included. Like,
exactly.
Another reason why I say I think it would matter more that he has not heard he is coming back versus hearing he's fired is like, the reason you need him to get the news that he's back is so he can hit the ground running immediately, make assessments of the staff, start to look at his roster, start the portal. Like, if he was coming back, you need to have him knowing he's back and hitting whatever ground running he can. And that hasn't happened yet, so that's, again, kind of a point why I still think this ends a certain way, but we'll all find out together. Hopefully we'll be able to bring you something more concrete over the next week, either here on this podcast or on GSU Panther Talk. We are all over the situation. We are just dying for finality. But we won't have it on this pod. We will started with baseball. Maybe not a whole lot better news, but also they're 10-8. So it's above 500. You still got that Georgia Tech win in the not too recent past that you can hold on to, but obviously Georgia Tech gets the win 4-1 on Tuesday, March 3rd, that day that will live in infamy. And they followed it up this weekend. They lose 2 of 3 at home to Charleston Southern. They end up playing a doubleheader on Saturday. They lose the opener 15-7. Kind of got away from them after a long rain delay. They win the middle game 1 on Saturday 5-2, and then drop in a 7-inning shortened game, believe also because of the weather, 9-1. And then they lose at home to Mercer 16-6 on Tuesday, day before we are recording this. So that is 0-2 against the Bears, kind of blowouts in both cases. Leaves them 10-8. They will go to Huntington to play Marshall for their Sunbelt opening series this weekend. And so I don't think this is like altogether like disaster zone, because Charleston Southern seems like a good mid-major program. They've been racking up a lot of wins this year. We'll be curious to track how they end up doing in their conference. And then Mercer has been a solid program since we've been tracking this stuff. So yes, you don't want to lose by 10 to anyone ever, in-state team, at home, all the rest of it. But like, that part of it is what it is, but it does feel like as they're just above 500 heading into what we know is a loaded league, like, this doesn't currently feel like a altogether different flavor of some of the recent teams we've seen. So they've won 30 games a couple of times there, and that's nothing to be sneezed at in this league that has got so many heavy hitters. But you also, if you were hoping for this year to be kind of breaking the trend of where it's been. Feels like we're about where we're at. And it might be a difference of like if they win enough games to get to 30, that feels like some kind of success. And if they're about where we were last year, 26, 30, something like that, then it feels like it's stagnating. But curious your thoughts is about to get into the nitty gritty Sunbelt play, road trip to Marshall.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same recipe that we've talked about over the years here. They kind of get into that middle of March and the pitching kind of falls or the hitting kind of falls. And it's tough because there's still good performances in this stretch here. Losing 4-1 to a Georgia Tech team that is still obliterating people, nothing to hang your head at. They obviously got this opening game victory versus Charleston Southern, but like Charleston Southern is playing really good baseball right now. So it's tough because yes, on the one hand, they are 10-8, and it does feel like it's the same thing that it's always been. But on the other hand, sometimes it's just kind of the nature of baseball, especially in smaller sample sizes. Like, yes, they need to go back to pitching better. That's not, I'm not breaking any news here. When you give up double
digits. This is why people listen to the THERSday podcast, for just the deep dive and the information you got to know that you maybe weren't going to pick out.
Exactly.
Pitch better.
Exactly. When you give up double-digit runs in 2 games within a week, and then the other game that you give up 9, and it's a 7-inning game, like functionally that's the same thing. That's not good. But also, we've seen better performances from a lot of the pitchers who ended up giving up those runs in those games. I remember 2 pods ago that I specifically talked about how the bullpen was a key catalyst in Georgia State's early season success. Well, on Friday when they gave up 15 runs, Tyson Benford gave up, I think, 3 runs, and then the bullpen gave up 12 runs. As the weekend went on, that typically was where Charleston Southern was finding success. So it's mostly about continuing to find, as Craig Counsell will say, outgetters in the bullpen, because that is where Georgia State has kind of always lacked since we've been watching baseball. I think they've had some good starting pitching, and it's college relief pitchers. Of course, that's going to be the area where they are at their weakest. Like, that's not a surprise. So I'm not going to sit here and try to spin a completely optimistic take going into Sunbelt play, but I'm also not really upset that they're. They split the Belmont series we talked about last week, and then they're one of their last 5 against some really good, tough teams. That's also going to probably be the case in Sunbelt play. You would like it if they could, steal some 2 out of 3s or, snag a out of conference midweek game against a weaker opponent. And we'll see if they're capable of doing that, but I don't know. It's hard for me to be too broken up about this because of specifically who they've lost to. Like, yes, play better, score more runs. Again, that's why you come to the Thursday night podcast. Score runs, pitch better. Wow. But, seriously, like, I think the offense, I have been pleasantly surprised that the offense has still been able to score despite the, perceived lack of power. They really aren't hitting home runs. And yeah, they scored 1 against Georgia Tech and scored 1 against Charleston Southern, but you put up 5-6 runs, I'm okay with that. At least that's good enough for you to have a chance. I'm not upset about it anyway. So, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I pulled up the numbers and I remembered I can share the screen I'm looking at. So I decided, because I was making a point about pitching as you were just kind of detailing. You can see it there if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify. Like, there's some sample sizes in there that are not super large, so you don't want to draw too much from it, but you've got 6 guys with an ERA of 10 or above, and then 3 more with an ERA of 8 or above on top of that, all in the bullpen. And Joshua Evans made 2 starts, but everyone else, bullpen arms, kind of what you were talking about. Not what you're looking for. I think the glass half full case is there have been times when we've gotten to conference play the last couple of years where it's like the guy on Friday, like the guy on Saturday, don't know what's happening on Sunday. Or like there was even a year where Sunday felt good, Friday felt good, and the Saturday they couldn't get the right mix. Starter's not been the issue. Tyson Benford's been the Friday guy. He's got a 3.32 ERA. Brian Crims on Saturday, 3.66 ERA. Jake Hembry, the Sunday starter, 3.15 ERA. Like, those are all great. Those walks are a little high.
Incredible numbers. And
Hembry's got 15 walks in 20 innings. Crims has got 12 in 19 and 2/3. So, like, you want to get that down because that could be a leading indicator of, like, that number is going to start getting away from you. But, like, that is, I feel like, the most collectively set the weekend rotation has been the last few years we've been covering this. And in that run, they've had some good pitchers come through. So it's not like it's even just like this is the best talent-wise across the board they've been. But just other years, they didn't necessarily have all of the weekend pieces. And so maybe you want a little bit more length, and losing some of the walks probably goes hand in hand with that. But you're at least in a good place there with who you're giving the ball to every day of the Sun Belt Series that you're going into. Jacob Cruz also has not given up an earned run. You like that? Yeah, he's got one of the team's saves. The thing I'm curious on, because now you're going into... You don't throw away the midweek games, but especially now that you're starting to play a weekend series every week, it's against a Sun Belt team, and it's like these are the games that are really going to pile up. Cole Roberts has been the Tuesday starter, putting up good numbers as well. He's in 14 innings pitched in 3 starts.
I'm going to say great numbers. He's been incredible.
2.57 ERA, 0.86 WHIP. Not having a walk issue, just 4 walks and 14 innings to the 12 strikeouts. Curious what his role starts being, because there's a world where, and we've seen it, like they kind of used Brady Jones in the kind of way over the last couple years, or before he went to Georgia Tech. Maybe Davis Chastain as well is kind of used a similar way. Does he start being kind of a floater on the weekend where starter gets you to the 6th inning and he gets you to the 9th? And like maybe start using the Tuesday, Wednesday games as an opportunity for some of those bullpen arms to just kind of get more reps, start getting the ERA down just by getting out there more and just kind of getting thrown into different situations and kind of find new roles for guys. But that's just something I'm shooting from the hip on, because we've seen Brad Stromdahl use like the 4th arm that he doesn't have a great role for, kind of as a floating kind of quasi starter, fill some innings during the weekends. Just something I'm monitoring on the baseball side of things. Kind of like that feels like a guy that you have to find a way to use on the weekend, because even if he's giving you great innings on a Tuesday game against Alabama State or Jacksonville State or whoever, kind of matters more if he can get you 6 really important outs against Marshall this weekend or Georgia Southern, App State down the line.
For sure, and it's kind of weird because if you look, you don't have to put it back up, but if you look at the stats there...
Great teamwork there.
Nah, it's totally fine. If you look at the stats there, like, there's definitely talent in the pitching side of the team. Like, sure, a 4.5 ERA is not necessarily the greatest of all time, but, like, a lot of the guys who are actually throwing consistent and good innings for them, whether it be starting pitching or, like there's a couple of relievers who I saw didn't have any starts, who they actually look like they were performing well. So it's not like there's no talent on the team. So like you said, it's just about marrying those midweek guys and kind of smoothing out that performance and getting those ERAs down, because I really think that they have a solid pitching staff. It might not be, the greatest pitching staff, but I think there is a way that they could piece together 27 outs every day.
And I think we still like just like the makeup of the lineup, series to series, trusting that because it's not so reliant on the deep ball, that you can grind some at bats and kind of find a way against some of these good Sun Belt teams. Like that feels like a more sustainable way to beat them than just relying on the home runs, because frankly the best pitchers know how to avoid the barrel. And so you got to find another way to beat them. Otherwise, you're going to be putting up a lot of zeros and not giving your staff a lot of a chance in those games. So I guess the other example I could have used as a hypothetical like midweek opponent is West Georgia, because that's who they're playing Tuesday back at home. So in the next week, Georgia State baseball starts their trek into Sun Belt play 6 p.m. Friday in Huntington, then 4 p.m. and 1 p.m. Saturday and Sunday to close out that series. And then they head home for a 6 p.m. first pitch against West Georgia on Tuesday on St. Paddy's Day. So a little bit of a festive spirit. Don't know if there's anyone with any... I don't think anyone can wear green. I don't know if anyone's going to wear green. I don't think West Georgia's got green. I don't think that's a thing that It's not a thing baseball teams do because spring training is the only thing that happens, so it's not like you'd wear like a theme uniform for that.
I think the Red Sox are the only team off the top of my head that
Yeah,
have
well,
a specific
figures.
dedicated jersey for it. But like even then, you'll see somebody walking around with like a green Red Sox jersey, and you'll stop and be like,
There's no green MLB teams.
Yeah, that's not a team. That's not a jersey that you normally wear. So like, when do they play that? So yeah, I don't think St. Patrick's Day is. Which is, sorry, totally aside. St. Patrick's Day is a smaller holiday, sort of. But like,
Careful.
there's so
You're the one who
many-
lives in Chicago. Who choose your words carefully.
Correct. But there are so many holidays that you can think of that just wrap neatly around a baseball season. 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day, like Halloween, you still get the playoffs a lot of times. So it's just kind of funny that St. Patrick's Day is the last one I think you could say, all right, we're not doing anything for that, and then now it's time for baseball.
Well, it also spiritually fits the holiday better than any other sport because sports because it's about drinking. It's like the only holiday
Exactly.
that is the only thing you do is drink, and so of course it should line up with the sport. But I guess it's just kind of like hockey and basketball that you lines up with. So, and Georgia State baseball this Tuesday against West Georgia for the St. Patty's Classic. Little in-state fun.
See, we
Nowhere
know
to
how to
go
have
from
fun
that.
still on the Thursday night podcast. Come on.
Yeah, and we should end here, not with my just kind of half-assed Irish accent there. There was good news for Georgia State Golf. They won the Surf Club Invitational up in North Myrtle Beach on Tuesday afternoon. Not only that, the tournament best record and 4 players in the top 15. Connor McMillan posted 3 straight 67s, which friend of the pod Mike Holmes pointed out. The golf aficionado Mike Holmes pointed out that even he probably not capable of posting 3 straight scores in the 60s like that. So props to Connor for what he did. And maybe the spring sports, and even if we went through with baseball, like kind of we'll see where it's going to go. But after all, this would be funny if like suddenly the spring sports go on a tear. After all the kind of misery
Right?
that they've gone through with football and basketball, it's like it's the funniest part of it is like, not to ruin our high note, but beach volleyball is kind of in a weird spot. I hadn't realized this until it was pointed out to me, but they're 8-8 right now on a 4-game winning streak. But it was kind of like dropping a lot of games for a program that had posted one of the best win-loss percentages in the whole department the last few years, and so it's like, what's going on? But
Yeah,
would
didn't
be
they
funny.
like go to the tournament recently?
Yeah, I mean they've gone to the tournament multiple times.
Yeah.
There's still the bar to clear of like not being a California-based team that is kind of getting in their way of being like the consistent like national winner, but nothing to be done there. Spring might be the time where you can latch on to anything happening with Georgia State because obviously the rest of it's not been very good. And so with that promise of less misery to come at some point, thank you for listening to this episode of the Thursday Night Podcast. As I said, the second we know anything definitive on the future of Jonas Hayes, the men's basketball program, any of it, we will bring it to you, whether it's on this podcast, whether it's me on Twitter, Brady M. Weiler, whether it's on GSU Panther Talk, 247 Sports. We got you covered. It has just been not a great time to try and have people covered because there hasn't been the information out there, but hopefully by the time we are in front of these microphones again, so I don't break 2 promises in a row, back-to-back pods, as far as the timeliness of pods and what information will be on there. Hopefully we have more to say for sure, but in the meantime, thank you for listening. We will catch you next time.